Mr. Harris here, and welcome to a new video of Chapter 4.2. In this video, we're going to do some checkpoint questions, and then afterwards we'll learn about fertilization and implantation. Alright, let's begin. This is question 1a. The tail of a sperm enables the sperm to move. The answer is yes, true. The tail of the sperm allows it to swim as well. Let's see question B. The nucleus of a sperm carries half the amount of genetic material. Obviously, this is DNA. They're talking about DNA as the nucleus of a nerve cell. The nerve cell over here is like a typical human body cell. So a typical body cell would have, yes, 46 chromosomes. Now let me ask you, for a sperm that is only present in the male parent or in males, this comes from the father. And I've told you before that the sex cells will only contain half the amount of genetic material, the chromosomes. So it would only have 23 chromosomes. So in this case, the answer is true. Let's see question C. Sperm production is one of the secondary sexual characteristics of males. Is that true or false? So I mentioned earlier, secondary sexual characteristics are the external features, right? So features like shoulders becoming broad and wider, having beards as well. So in this case, the answer is false. Secondary sexual characteristics are features that you can see from the outside. Alright, let's have a look at question 3. The graph shows the change in the thickness of the uterine lining of a woman during February. So thickness of the uterine lining. Let's read the question. During which period in February did menstruation occur? So let us recall what is menstruation. So this is when the uterine lining breaks down, right? So breaking down of the uterine lining. So how can we know when did the uterine lining break down? So let me ask you, is the thickness gonna increase? Will it be thicker or will it decrease? Obviously, when it's breaking down, the thickness is gonna drop, right? So it decreases in thickness. Now let's have a look at the graph and see where it decreases. So over here on the first part, you can see that this is rising, so it increases. In this part of the graph, it's more or less stable. However, in this part of the graph, you would notice that the thickness of the uterine lining decreases. So the part in orange, it decreases. So this is roughly from day 20 all the way to day 25. So let us go back and check. Day 20 to day 25, the answer is C. Alright, so now I have a question. How is a baby born? How do you get a new life? So when the parents decide to have a baby, what happens is the sperms would swim up. Alright, it would go up all the way to the oviduct. However, if there is no ovum in the oviduct, do you remember what the ovum is? Yes, the female sex cell. If there is no ovum, all the sperms will die in 3 days. Alright, so eventually they will die. However, if there is an ovum in the oviduct, one of the sperms would go inside the ovum. As I've told you before, the tail of the sperm allows it to move or to swim. So what happens is the tail remains behind, but the nucleus of the sperm and ovum, they will fuse together. Fuse meaning they will combine together. And the rest of the sperms will eventually die. So when this nuclei is just a plural form, when the nucleus of the sperm and ovum, when they fuse together, we call that a zygote. zygote being formed. And this process is called fertilization. All right, I repeat, the nucleus of the sperm and ovum, when they fuse together, we call it a zygote, and this process is called fertilization. As I mentioned earlier, in one of the questions earlier when we did the checkpoint questions, the sperm has 23 chromosomes, the male sex cell, the female sex cell, the ovum has 23 chromosomes as well. When they're fused together in the process of fertilization, they form a zygote. Zygote. This has 46 chromosomes. All right, so you can imagine a combination or a fusion occurring. After this fusion occurs, after fertilization, the zygote would undergo many repeated cell divisions. So remember, we learned about cell division in the previous few videos. Now, these repeated cell divisions would form a ball of cells, and this is where the embryo starts to develop. So this actually is the baby. All right, but as I've told you, baby is not an accurate term to use, so we'll use an embryo. So this is a diagram, a picture of a 3-day-old embryo, which was formed from the zygote. So once the embryo reaches the uterus, it would attach to the thickened uterine lining. Now, do you remember why the uterine lining always thickens? It is in case the embryo is there, so it provides support to the embryo. This process is also called implantation. So you're planting the embryo onto the uterus. So let's have a look. Let's summarize so far what we've learned. So an ovum is released from the ovary. That's the very first step. And afterwards, when the ovum reaches with the sperm, so the sperm and the ovum, they would fuse together to form a zygote. Then the zygote would repeatedly have many cell divisions to form an embryo. And then the embryo would attach to the thickened uterine lining, and this process is called implantation. All right, so let's just wrap up quickly this part. When a sperm fuses with an ovum to form a blank in fertilization, a sperm fuses with an ovum to form a zygote. The zygote would divides repeatedly to form an, what happens after it continually undergoes cell division? It forms an embryo, yes. Finally, when the embryo attaches to the thickened uterine lining, this process is called, yes, implantation. All right, so we've learned the first couple of steps of how a baby is born. So the first step was fertilization. And just now, we've also learned about implantation. Implantation. All right, in the next couple of videos, we'll learn some more steps of how a baby would eventually be born. All right, I'll see you in the next ones. Bye.